I think that right now, at this moment in history, the two-state solution has been rendered no longer possible. And we have been forced to deal with a new reality that requires rethinking both of our ideologies. And let me explain that. And it's not going to be easy, it's going to be painful for both sides. For Palestinian Arabs, it became very clear that we will never be able to get rid of the Zionist presence in our land. Not even the settlements. That today in our land, in Palestine, there's about 6 million non-Arabs. And they're Jews, and they're living there, and it's home to them, and they're settled, and they're rooted there, and they're not going anywhere. And not by ourselves, and not with the help of the Arab world or the Muslim world or anybody are they going anywhere. The future, our future, requires and includes 6 or 7 million Jews who live in the land and who consider it part of their homeland. So we have to rethink Palestinian nationalism. It's no longer Arab nationalism. Our nation of Palestine today must include 6 or 7 million Jews who think of it as home.
You were part of the Oslo process. How do you compare that process with what you see you want to do now?
Well, that process, I'm very sorry to say, was sold to both peoples on the basis of a lie. We were told that this is only a step towards statehood. We were told this is only an interim agreement for 5 years. It's been now over 20 years. We were told that this division into A, B, and C is a gradual process that will evolve into statehood, which it wasn't. By the same token, many Israelis said, this is just a temporary state of affairs because they are still under us, under our control, under our rule. And the minute they don't do what we want, we can clamp because we have all the power.
There's certainly an urgency for the Palestinians to find a solution. Is there an urgency for the Israelis?
Well, many Israelis today think that there is no urgency. They think that they have definitely superior military power. They definitely are controlling all the land and all the borders. Not only do they have nuclear power and very, very effective military and an arms industry that's 5th or 6th in the world, but they have the support of the United States that will insulate them from the rest of the world, that insulate them from international law, that insulates them from really the requirement to live as other people are living. But how long will that last? What will happen when that umbrella is removed and they have to deal with the reality? What happens when, even within Israel itself, this half of the population refuses to continue to be disenfranchised forever?
You're advocating the end of the Jewish state, is that correct?
I am advocating a major radical change in the concept of Zionism, where your state is not exclusively Jewish, but is Jewish and Arab. Just like I'm advocating for Palestinians, that the end of the dream of an exclusively Arab state and the beginning of a vision for an Arab-Jewish state.
Why would Jews in Israel want to accept this?
Because they have no choice. Because we're living in the 21st century. Because international law and the world and the progression of human nature no longer accepts inequality. They don't accept apartheid. They don't accept slavery. They don't accept colonialism. They don't accept a permanent state of oppression. Israel has justified all these things over the years because they were temporary measures, because they were waiting for the Arabs to accept them, because they thought there was a security need, because they felt as victims of the Holocaust and of anti-Semitism, they needed security. And in the name of security, they had to keep Palestinians under control. But that's a temporary state of affairs.
I think there are Israelis who still believe that they can be democratic and Jewish.
How? How? This is the history has shown, not only at the theoretical level, but also at the practical level, that for Israel to be Jewish, as France is French, they needed to acquire more land from the Arabs and put it in the public domain, and to declare that public land is there to serve Jews, not to serve all the citizens. So as long as you keep an ideology that says Israel is a Jewish country only for the Jews and not for all its citizens, then you necessarily not only have to discriminate against Arabs, but you have to increasingly oppress them. You have to increasingly suppress them. You have to increasingly deny them more and more. So it's not an accident that Israel has been becoming more and more right-wing in recent years. It's not because they have become more evil. It's because their ideology requires that they be more repressive in order to maintain a Jewishness.
What would it look like practically?
That needs to be worked out between the two parties, but I have my very clear vision. It would include a legal scheme that is enshrined in constitutional provisions that require a huge majority to shift or to change, but that would address the Jewish fears and the Arab fears, and that will continue to exist regardless of the shifting demographies. I need to have assurances of my right today as a minority in this state, but those same guarantees need to safeguard your rights when demography changes and you become the minority in our state. Somehow we need to have a state that genuinely belongs to both of us, regardless of demography, because otherwise every new immigrant that comes in, I will feel threatened. And every additional baby my wife carries is a danger to you. So what are you going to do? Sterilize us to maintain your demographic edge? Or create structures where you can live and continue and thrive and prosper whether or not you're a majority? We cannot prevent people from feeling bigotry or racism, but we can prevent laws and structures that favor one group at the expense of another.
What would those constitutional structures be?
Well, for example, I think that the law of return needs to be part of the constitution of the state for Jews, because that's very important to you, but that there should also be a law of return for Palestinian Arabs. I think there needs to be a constitutional court with maybe 2 judges who are Arabs and 2 who are Jewish out of the 5, and the decisions have to be done by at least 4 out of the 5 on every issue.
Who is the 5th?
Well, gets elected on merit alone. We need to address Jewish fears regarding the defense establishment. I personally have no problem with having Jews be the head of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the atomic weapons. But I would want every other position in the Army to be strictly on the basis of merit and not on whether you are Jewish or Arab. And I want to have the right of any Jew or any Arab to serve or not to serve in the Army.
You're talking about a separation of church and state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a necessity, especially where you have people of different religions and of no religion. How can you have a modern state where one group says, my religion, and particularly my denomination, not only controls my life, but controls the life of everybody else because I'm in power or because I'm a majority? You need to have a constitution that safeguards these rights precisely to the minorities and safeguards them from the caprice of the majority, which can change. Remember, the demography, the majority can change. One day I'm in the majority, the next day you're in the majority. Why should I dictate to you or you dictate to me? You must have a constitution that safeguards my individual freedom and my group rights.
But the Jews are in the majority now. And so what is going to make them change?
They're a majority only by force of arms because they are prohibiting Palestinians from coming in and they are driving as much as they can Palestinians out that they can. But even with all these controls, the Arabs are increasing in their numbers. So what are you going to do? Force sterilization? How can you maintain a system like that in perpetuity? You can only do that for short periods of time and only by repression. If you are going to allow people their human rights and their human dignity, then you must have a system that safeguards your rights even when you're no longer the majority.
I think the Israelis, if they said, okay, if there were 2 million Jonathan Kuttabs among all the Palestinians, we'd have a negotiating partner. Do you really think that the Palestinians can become Jonathan Kuttabs who speak with understanding of Jewish needs, who take Israeli insecurity into account?
Well, I can tell you that the majority of Palestinians today are convinced that armed struggle will not get them their rights. And I include in that figure people within Hamas who are fighters, who today are carrying the gun, but who know that the gun will not get them their rights, but they feel that they need to fight because they are not being heard otherwise. I can tell you that many Palestinians today find it hard to believe that Israelis are insecure because they see their power. But the majority of Palestinians today, I think, are open and willing to reach a major historic compromise with Israel. I think the vast majority of Palestinians today will tell you they realize the reality of Jewish Israelis living in the land and wanting to stay in the land. They don't like that these Jews are also taking more and more land and more settlements. They don't like that these Jews are not giving even Israeli Arab citizens equality. They don't like the fact that Israel seems to say the gun and the power is the only thing that counts, because that gives them the wrong message. That, okay, if the gun is the only thing that works, then maybe I'd better pick up a gun because otherwise nobody will listen to me. The majority of Palestinians today have great interest in international law and in human rights and in an eventual solution that accommodates both sides. But if they get nothing, if they are not even given rights in that tiny sliver of land that remains of Palestine, then they're going to say, no, I want all of the land.
What kind of organization do you have behind you?
I don't. I'm not. I don't represent a political party. I'm not in politics. I'm very active in human rights, but I'm also very active in peace and dialogue and reconciliation. I made a point of studying Hebrew on my own and joining the Israeli Bar Association because I want to understand the other side. A lot of Palestinians have learned Hebrew and know a lot about Jewish history that they didn't know 50 years ago or 70 years ago. I think every opportunity for people to meet together, to see each other as human beings is a positive step. Right now, most Palestinians at the West Bank and Gaza, they only see Jews as either soldiers or settlers who are there with guns to take their rights and to control their lives. I think they need to see them in other forums as human beings.
What about taking this idea to the Palestinian leadership?
I think most of the Palestinian leadership would be quite open to this idea. However, currently, their power comes from the Oslo Agreement. Their power comes from the Israelis allowing them to exercise power. Their power comes from the permits that they get. So they are forced to talk as if the two-state solution is still a possibility, even though they know it's been totally and completely undermined. Yeah, I just want to say one thing at the end. Sometimes if you live within a certain paradigm, it's hard to imagine anything else. People who lived behind the Iron Curtain could not imagine a different Europe where they are free. People living under apartheid had a very hard time imagining a post-apartheid world. And sometimes change comes very quickly and surprises people. If we are going to wait till the other side sort of accepts or incorporates or somehow has a moment of revelation where they suddenly decide they want to give equality or freedom a chance, we may have to wait a long time. Sometimes we have to dream. We have to have a vision. We have to say, I don't know when and I don't know how, but I have hope that one day Jews and Arabs can, in fact, live together. It's a lie that we can't. Just a few months ago, a car carrying Jewish settlers from Hebron, some of the most radical among them, was driving on a road, one of the few roads in the West Bank which Jews and Arabs can use. And the car fell into a ravine. Immediately, Palestinian cars stopped and they rushed down and to save those who were in the accident. And it was natural. Nobody had to stop them. Nobody had to wait for orders to come from the Palestinian leadership. Nobody had to sit there and do an analysis of, do I do this or not? It's just the human reaction. Here's somebody in need. The car has fallen into the ravine. So you help people out. You save them. You go to their help. This is, for me, a reminder that we are human beings. And we can, in fact, react to each other as human beings. It is not necessary that we only interact as enemies who are out to get each other and who are to be afraid of each other. and who cannot trust each other. We can, in fact, live together. It is possible.
Do you think an hour after the accident they went back to being who they were?
Well, I think an hour after the accident, when they tried to take those people into Jerusalem for a hospital, they were not allowed to go across the border because you need a permit to go into Jerusalem, so they had to turn them over to some Jewish ambulance to come and take them into Hadassah. So the reality does force them to pull back and to see that you are an Arab, you are not a Jew, you are allowed, you are not allowed, you can walk, you cannot walk, you can live here, you cannot live here, you need a permit, you don't need a permit. This is the apartheid laws. This is not human nature. This is not who we are. This is not how we can live together. That's my point.